Well, hello, welcome, NewPointe Online. We are so glad that you're joining us today. My name is Jonathan, and I help lead our Worcester campus. Now, if you come to NewPointe Online and you view regularly, I want to encourage you, go to our YouTube channel and hit that like or subscribe button, and this helps us get content to you much faster. Here at NewPointe, our mission is to inspire people to follow Jesus, and our channel is one of the ways that we can do that. This Sunday, and actually every Sunday in November, we get the amazing opportunity to partner with our community, our other campuses, in helping to collect toys for families in need in our local communities. And so if you're interested at all, bring your new unwrapped gift to any one of our physical locations during 9 or 11 a.m. We would love to partner with you. This is a great opportunity to get into the community and help bless families in need during this Christmas season. Well, hey, I'm so excited about today's service. We got a great service in line, so let's go ahead and get started.
How we need you, Jesus. How we need you, God. Every day in your hands, you were there before time began. Sovereign one, I rest in your plan. From the depths to the dawn, you are there. Your promise is strong. I will trust with all that I am. Jesus, Jesus, oh, how I need you. You stay the same. You are good in your ways. Jesus, Jesus, oh,
Hey, NewPointe, I am so glad that you've joined us today because we're in for a tremendous blessing. Dr. Tim Elmore is with us. He is the founder and the CEO of Growing Leaders. Tim has given himself over the past 30 years to study and research young people and children and how they relate to mom and dad and how they relate to leaders. And so he's written 35 books. He's impacted and influenced over 2.8 million people, and we have him here today. Tim, we just want you to know that we're glad that you're here. We're excited about what you're going to share with us, and so let's give him a warm NewPointe welcome today. Tim, we're glad that you're here today.
Thank you. Good morning. What Pastor Dwight failed to mention in my introduction is that I'm the president of the Dwight Mason Fan Club. Yes, I am. Anybody a member? Yeah, absolutely. I am too. Good. Yeah, Dwight and I have known each other for just decades, and it's so fun to be with you. And what a great facility. Great first service. I'm looking forward to what we're about to do the next 35 minutes. So this is the beginning of a series. You'll be in this for the next several Sundays, but we're really talking about what are we doing now for the purpose of later, and specifically the next generation. So this is for parents, certainly, but teachers, coaches, aunts and uncles, anybody that cares about the next generation, this is going to be really relevant for you. So I'm calling my talk today kind of the first part of this series, helping the next gen win. And really it should be gens, plural. There are two generations of kids today. Generation Z, which you probably have heard of, that would be middle school, high school, college, and young professionals, okay? And then the younger children are Gen Alpha. The Alpha generation would be elementary school all the way down to birth, and both are growing up in the 21st century in a very, dare I say, tumultuous time. Is that okay to say in here? So here's what I'd like to do. Since we're talking about the next generation, I'd like to start with a pop quiz. Would you like to take a pop quiz to see how well you know the emerging generation? So you know they're on TikTok. So up on the screen, I have several terms right here that would represent terms that Gen Z would be using on TikTok, but not limited to TikTok. You cannot look these up, but you're gonna have 30 seconds. I have 1 minute. I'm actually gonna give you 30 seconds because this looks like a really smart group of people. So these are the terms. You have 30 seconds to decipher them. You can talk to a neighbor, but you can't talk to Google, all right? Here we go. Okay, I told you 30 seconds. Time is up. Okay, I'm gonna let you grade your own paper, okay? So we're gonna go through these one by one, and you're gonna see if you know the answer. If you know the right answer, just yell it out. And I'm gonna give you the right answer on the screen. We'll see how well you do, okay? So this term takes several seats. What's that mean? Okay, we have a nothing, okay. So it means you want somebody to calm down. So everything's hyperbole today. You don't just take a seat, take several seats. And by the way, my text message will be all caps with 4 exclamation points, right? Okay, no cap, what's that mean? Yeah, it means you're not lying or exaggerating. By the way, I gotta tell you a funny story. I have a friend who's a principal of a high school, and he was talking to one of his seniors in the hallway, and the senior said, "Sir, my GPA is 1.5. And my friend said, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No cap." My friend said, "No gown either, buddy." I thought that was very appropriate. Okay, bop. What's bop mean? Yeah, it means a song you think is really good. Left no crumbs. Okay, are you afraid to talk? Okay, it means you did a really good job. So you did a good job, you left no crumbs. Okay, it's nice and neat and tidy and fixed up. Stan. Yeah, okay, it means you're a huge fan of somebody. So stan is actually a cross between stalker and fan. I'm not a stalker, but I'm more than a fan. I'm a stan. Living rent-free. Yeah, it means you can't stop thinking about something. You might say that song is living rent-free in my head. You just can't stop thinking about it. I like to say my wife is living rent-free in my head, all right? Hundo P. You guys, come on. Okay, this is short term for 100%. Hundo P, 100%. All right, last one, drip. What's that mean? Yeah, good. It's a cool, trendy sense of style. Is anybody in here as old as I am? I remember when the term drip was a derogatory term. Like in high school, you go, you're such a drip. No, I'm not, and now it's like full circle. It's cool, a trendy sense of style. You can call me a drip anytime you want to. Okay, all right, let's see how well you did. Did anybody in this room get all of them right? Let me see your hands. Anybody get all of them? Okay, I think I better ask another question. Anybody raise your hand and say, I have no idea what we just did the last 30 seconds of this worship service. Yes, okay. Okay, so what I'm about to share with you is like a condensed version of a book I released just a few years ago called Generation Z Unfiltered. I love Generation Z. 59 million young members of the American population. And by the way, the book is about 9 specific challenges that young people face today that we didn't face back in the 20th century. It's just a new day. So this morning, let me begin with a couple of stories, case studies, if you will, that I think will give you a picture of the spectrum that Gen Z is on in their lives, okay? So the first one is a story that you're gonna love. It's about Virgil. A few years ago, Virgil was in the 8th grade, and he was playing video games with his friend Kashan at 2 a.m. That's what 8th graders do. Now, Kashan wasn't with him in the room, but he was with him in the apartment complex. That's another thing we can do now. So they're both playing this game, 2 a.m., and both of these boys hear a loud noise, a loud clap outside their front windows. So both boys scampered to the front window to see what's happening. Well, they noticed that a storm was moving in, but they both assumed it's probably not a big deal. Well, they were wrong. It was a big deal. Anybody remember Hurricane Harvey? So these guys are in Dickinson, Texas, just outside of Houston. Hurricane Harvey was sweeping in. Before he knew it, Virgil was up to his knees in water. It was flooding the apartment. Well, I love how Virgil reacts. He didn't wait for an adult to do something, didn't wait for permission from an adult to do something. He grabbed his phone, and then he grabbed his mom and his older sister, and he ran them upstairs to a 2nd floor to get away from the flooding waters. That's pretty smart. In fact, in my mind, that'd be an act of heroism right there. But it didn't stop there. Once they get up to the 2nd floor, Virgil gets a call on his smartphone from Kashan, his friend. Virg, we're drowning over here. We need help. Well, once again, Virgil doesn't wait for an adult to do something, nor permission from anybody. He scampers right back downstairs, true story, to his 1st floor apartment, grabs the air mattress that he slept on at night and uses it as a raft. And he paddles over to save Kashan and Kashan's whole family from the flooding waters. And that would be an act of heroism in itself, at least in my mind. But you can imagine, as Virgil's going back and forth, he's hearing the cries for help from other people in this apartment complex. Virgil spends the rest of the night out there. According to the police report, the next day, Virgil saved 17 lives that night as an 8th grade teenager. Isn't that cool? I love hearing stories like that. That's a picture. Let me give you another picture, though, maybe one that's much more prevalent. This is Haley, beautiful teenager. Haley was a cheerleader, went to a public school, came from a great middle-class home, church-going home, much like probably many of you in this room. So it was a shocker when her parents went into her bedroom one night and her body was lying on the floor. She wasn't gone, but she'd attempted to complete suicide. They rushed her to the emergency room and they were able to save her. But everyone was in utter shock. They had fellow cheerleaders, classmates, people that followed her on Instagram, where she was posting goofy, silly, fun, happy moments, not knowing that inside was this seething crockpot of angst, anxiety, depression. In fact, I'm sure all of you know, if you know anything about the next gen, there are struggles with mental health right now like we have never seen before. Anxiety has been normalized, and it's not the kids' fault. It's the world they're growing up in. We were all ambushed by the smartphone, which I don't think is evil, but it's 10,000 messages coming at us every day. It's ridiculous. I don't think our brains were hardwired to be overwhelmed with that much information. But what I want you to capture is this. Virgil is a picture and Haley is a picture. And they lie somewhere on the spectrum of Gen Z. So here's what I mean. They're both on either extreme, and you probably know a lot of people somewhere in the middle between Haley and Virgil. But they kind of illustrate that Gen Z's world is marked by two major realities. If you looked at the data on young people today, let's say teens today, you're gonna notice two major markers that describe their world. On the one hand, there's a high sense of agency. That was Virgil. A high sense of power, of I can do this. I don't need help. And part of that's fostered by the smartphone. Would you agree? It's like, I can look anything up, you know? So there's a high sense of agency. Employers tell me they're hiring recently minted graduates and they're going, I can't believe the audacity from that young person, what they're asking for in the interview. This is kind of the world that Gen Z's in. But at the same time, not only a high sense of agency, but a high sense of anxiety. That was Haley, meaning this world of angst and panic attacks and not even sure if I can make it through the day. So this is kind of like screaming, don't need your help. This is screaming, desperately need your help. So on any given day, teachers, parents, coaches are gonna feel this, I need your arm around my shoulder, I need your hands off. I need this arm around your shoulder, I need your hands off. And you guys that are young in the room, you might be feeling, seriously? Yeah, we don't know what to do because it's not quite clear. We live in a very uncertain world. Haven't we noticed that since 2020 when no one knew what to do with a pandemic? It was crazy. I thought about the kids looking about the adults, fighting and arguing, mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, stay inside, don't stay inside. Did you not wonder about that? Did you ever put yourself in the shoes of a 12 or 13-year-old kid and thought, we guys look like a bunch of idiots as grown-ups? Am I right about this? Okay, so one last thought before I move on. Both of these realities were deepened by smartphones. My sense of I can do it and my sense of I'm overwhelmed. So minimally, can I just say, moms and dads in the room, lead with empathy. I know we need to build resilience and resourcefulness and grit. I know that. Start with empathy to get to grit. Start with empathy to get to grit. So let's answer this big looming question. In fact, I would say today's talk that I'm about to give you is gonna feel like a doctor's appointment, okay? There's gonna be a diagnosis and then a prescription, okay? Please stay for the prescription, okay? Don't just leave with a diagnosis. So I thought the best way to do the early look at who are these kids today would be to compare and contrast them to you and I. So I know I have a bunch of age groups in this room. Do you realize for the first time in modern history, we're living at a time where there are 7 distinct generations alive at the same time? Because people are living longer and mamas are still having babies. 7 distinct generations. 6 of them are still out and about, and 5 of them are at work, and 5 of them are probably at this church. So let me give you the 6 that we most know lots of data about, okay, from oldest to youngest. What I'd like to do is walk through this series of generations, notice the mindset that shapes them as they're growing up, and then I'd like you just to compare and contrast them with your generation. So you're gonna see yourself in this chart, but you're also gonna see the older and younger, okay? So let's go to the oldest generation. Let's talk about the era they were born. So the builder generation would be the oldest generation, really still having a number. They were born between 1929 and 1945. That would be my mom and dad's generation. My father just passed away at 90 years old in 2020. So he grew up during this period. They're called builders because they built so much out of so little. Think about the years they were growing up. Now, after the builders come the baby boomers, 1946 to 64, they were called the boom generation because there was a boom of babies starting 9 months after World War II was over, okay? This is a biology lesson for you. 76.4 million people were born in 18 years. That had never happened in America before. And that affected the economy, enrollment, enlistment, Social Security, everything else. It affected the tone of our American culture. Okay? After the baby boomers come the baby busters or Gen X. Many of you are Xers in the room. The title that stuck with you was Generation X because you said when you were surveyed, don't call us anything, call us the X generation. But the first title social scientists actually gave you was baby buster. And do you know why? These are the years you were born and grew up because the first year of your generation's existence was the public introduction of the birth control pill. So instead of a boom, it was a bust, wasn't it? In fact, if you add on top of that Roe versus Wade in 1973, you have a shrinking population, not a booming. So it was dramatically lower, which affected employment, enrollment, enlistment, everything else, okay? Now, after Gen X comes Gen Y, or the millennials, basically the people born in the 80s and 90s, okay? Millennials are now the largest generation in American history. They're bigger than the baby boomers. Boomers are 76 million, millennials are 80 million, okay? Large and in charge, right, millennials in the room? My two kids are both millennials, okay? Bethany, my daughter, is 35, Jonathan's 31, and they are part of that large and in charge. And by the way, they're the largest generation at work right now. They're more than half the workforce. All right, after Gen Y comes Gen Z. We're gonna talk about the Gen Zers and the Gen Alphas today. Some social scientists start them kind of like late 90s all the way through. I had them starting right at the turn of the century because I believe so much pivoted as we moved from the 20th century to the 21st century. So Gen Z would be there. And then following Gen Z would be a generation probably you haven't heard a lot about. The Gen Alphas. These are the younger children that have been born the last 8 years or so, their birth all the way up to second, third grade. But they're the youngest kids that we're beginning to measure. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to take a few minutes and look at the narrative of each one as they grow up in different times, with different new technology being released, different tragedies happening that mold us and shape us, different lots, music, songs, TV shows, etc. And by the way, one of the reasons this is true is because of neuroscience. I don't know if you know this, but people develop a little bit like wet cement. You know how you can press your handprint in a pocket of wet cement when it's just a day old and make your handprint in it, but you try to do that a year later, you can't do it. Our neural pathways in our brain that transmit messages are very plastic. The plasticity is very high the first 20 to 25 years of our life. That's why you can learn a new language, 3 or 4 new languages at 8 years old. Harder to do when you're older. So just like it takes a jackhammer to change a sidewalk years after it's poured, anybody feel like it might take a jackhammer to change your mind about a few things if you're over 40 years old? Am I right about this or not? Okay, so let's jump into this. Let's talk about the life paradigm. What's the mindset that each generation has as they move from school to their career? Okay, from backpack to briefcase, what's the mindset? All right, go back to my mom and dad's generation. Look at the years. As I interviewed loads and loads and loads of these people in retirement villages who were 89, 90, 91 years old, I had so much fun. We had to talk loud, but we had so much fun. That was a joke. Here's the mindset I got. Be grateful you have a job. Now, somebody talk to me. Why would I assign this one to them? Yeah, exactly, the Great Depression. My dad, I mentioned, was born in 1930. The first decade of his life was the Great Depression. The next 5 years, World War II. So he's frugal and conservative and grateful. Save the wrapping paper at Christmas. Don't throw it away. You know, that sort of thing. All right. Boomers come along. I gave us, I'm one, baby boomers, the life paradigm. I want better because boomers felt entitled to a better life than mom and dad had had. It wasn't a time of depression. It was a time of expansion, right? Look at the years. Shopping malls were popping up. McDonald's was franchising, okay? And we just helped win a major world war. The feeling was there. After the baby boomers come the baby busters. Xers in the room, you're gonna love this one. I gave the Xers the life paradigm as you started your career. Keep it real. Keep it real. Don't tell me life's wonderful. It's not wonderful. All right, so boomers were everything idealistic, kind of like the millennials. The Xers, look at the years the Xers grew up, okay? So by the late 1960s, not only was the Vietnam War going on, it was on TV. And even though LBJ from the White House kept saying, everything's fine over there, we started seeing footage that said, it's not fine over there. And then you had the Watergate scandal. Now you had a Democrat and a Republican both lying from the White House. There was a very real wall that went up in the minds and hearts of American adults that said, I'm not gonna blindly trust a leader. And even though Xers, you were just children back then, you were being raised and taught and coached and parented by a skeptical generation of adults, you grew up a little more cynical yourself as a generation. All right. The millennials came along. Millennials in the room, you're gonna love this, I think. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but as I interviewed loads and loads and loads of millennials, 20-somethings, 30-somethings, here's the mantra I came up with. Life is a cafeteria. Now, let me explain. Just like when you go to the cafeteria and you grab a tray and a plate and you go down the line and you make up your own meal tailored for your taste buds. A little bit of broccoli, a little bit of roast beef, love the Jell-O, I'm gonna get some pudding, and you kind of make the meal for you. These young professionals have grown up in a time of digital customization where you can mix and match and personalize everything. So let me give you some examples that you would know right away. My two kids, Bethany and Jonathan, in their 30s, stopped buying compact discs years ago to get their music. Why would they buy a CD? There might be 6 songs I don't like on that CD. I get one song at a time for my own playlist on Apple Music, Spotify. It's a buffet. True? They'll make educational decisions this way. They'll graduate high school and go to 2 or 3 different colleges for 1 degree. One of them's overseas. And in many higher ed institutions today, did you know this? You don't have to choose a major. You can make up a major. Just make it up. They just want your money. I'm being serious with you. By the way, they'll make spiritual decisions this way. A little bit of Jesus, a little bit of Buddha, a little bit of Oprah, shake it together. I've made up my faith. There's no one true source. But this is what I'm seeing from New York to California. It's very, very interesting. It's almost like a free agent mindset that's coming to work. Now, Gen Zers, I gotta be honest with you, I absolutely love Generation Z. Tonight we're gonna have so much fun as I talk to parents specifically on how to lead and raise a generation that's been in such a different world than the one you were raised in. I talk to middle school students, high school students, college students, and young professionals. And as I try to grab what's the mindset you're bringing into adulthood, you know what it is? I'm coping and hoping. So they're hopeful because they're young, but right now they feel like I'm just coping with a very uncertain world. I'm wrestling with mental health issues. Remember Haley? And I'm looking at a world where it looks like the grown-ups don't really know what they're doing. Washington, D.C. is 80 years old. Come on. If you were 15, wouldn't you be thinking these things too? So there's a sense of, I'm just coping right now. And by the way, the coping oftentimes is not coping skills. We all need coping skills. Life's hard. Sometimes it's just coping mechanisms. I got to binge on 6 hours of video games a day. It's the only way I feel like I can make it through the day and be sane. Make sense? Now, the Gen Alphas are way too young to even know their mindset when they go into work. But here's what I want you to notice. Just let this inform your leadership of the next gen, whoever you are. Look at each generation. It's kind of like a pendulum swinging back and forth as the tone of culture changes with each new generation. For instance, the builder generation is a generation of caution, naturally. Baby boomers, generation of confidence. Xers, back to caution. Millennials, back to confidence. Gen Z, back to caution. Isn't that interesting? So 15 years ago, if you were a school teacher, you might have needed to say, now wait a minute, Josh, you might not be the VP of the company when you're 23. Hold on. Today, you might need to say, Austin, give it another shot. I believe it's in you. You can do this. But it's just a different day. The tone of culture is different. Now, let's do one more that I thought you might appreciate. Attitude toward authority. Anybody think that might have changed in 95 years? Okay. So I'm going to do this rapid fire, but I want to get to the kids today. So for my mom and dad's generation, it was respect them, right? That's what they taught me. For the boomers, it was replace them. We just thought we'd take over, thank you very much. And we will not leave office until we die, yes. Okay? I'm so sorry, that's not a Democrat or a Republican say. It's just, they're so old. Please, somebody under 60, show up. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm venting. Let me get back to the talk here. Xers, I gave you, endure them. We got to put up with these knuckleheads. Let's go get a Starbucks. Millennials, choose them. Because remember, life's a cafeteria. So here's a good example. About 15 years ago, 2008, I was on the University of Georgia campus talking to undergrads about the subject of mentoring, just talking their view of mentoring. And it was very common for me to hear from college students statements like this. Well, yeah, he's my professor, but he's not my mentor. And what they meant by that is, I have to take this class, but I'm choosing the people that I let pour into me. Isn't that interesting? There's a sense of agency and empowerment. For Gen Zers, now please hear this. Every one of them, Every one of them was so respectful, but they were candid. Their view of authority, in many ways, because of the fact that they grew up not just with a cell phone, but they grew up with a smartphone, is this: not sure I need them. I had a high school student recently say to me in a very respectful tone, but very matter of fact, my teachers are obsolete. Now, you would get offended by that if you're a teacher, but he didn't mean it that way. He just meant, I can look up everything you're saying in this classroom. Tell me something I can't look up. So listen, they don't need us for information, adults. They need us for interpretation. Do you see the difference? I can look up 20 YouTube videos. Now give context to all the content that I have. That's the changing job we have. And yet many of us are not making that change. We're still lecturing and parenting like we've always done it, and it is a new day. And we will be seen as irrelevant very rapidly unless we change the way we lead. You still lead, but change the way you lead. Now, as I talk to elementary school children, but mostly their teachers and their parents, this is what I think is coming with the Gen Alphas. Question everything. So if you think you got it bad now, fasten your seatbelts. I think because the average 4-year-old, 95% of them are on a tablet by age 4, getting information. Okay, now I just do this for you to see. I wanted you to compare and contrast your generation with theirs. Now, may I ask you a question on the heels of this information? I want you to see the question on the screen, but more than that, I want you to look at the photo. I think it says everything. Do you feel the disconnect? Do you feel the disconnect? Okay, I love the hair on both of these guys. Okay, so let me suggest something to you. This has been really helpful to me at my life station now. Let's say you and I hopped on a plane and we flew to China. I'm making this up, but we flew to China. As we get off that plane, would you not agree with me? We would naturally be psyched up to work harder at connecting with people in that other country, wouldn't we? Because we know we're about to step off and interact with people that come from a different place. They speak a different language. They have different customs. They have different values. Bingo. That's how it is between you and Gen Z. In fact, what do we do in a foreign land? We work harder to connect with people. And I'm challenging you, moms and dads, teachers and coaches. Are you willing to work harder to connect with the next gen? And sometimes it's so much work, you don't want to do it. And neither do I. Hello? My goal is to help adults turn our frustration into fascination. They have so much to add. They've looked so much up. And they bring an intuition about the future with them. So they got the timely stuff. We've got the timeless stuff. You know that's what you bring. As an adult Christ follower, you got some timeless truths they need. They got some timely insights you need. What if we got together? Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be cool if in the body of Christ, young and old were teaching each other? It was reverse mentoring. That's what I'm lobbying for. Okay, I can tell you're very excited. Let's keep going. Okay, just kidding. I have a favorite passage in the Old Testament that's really strange. In fact, you'll think, I can't believe that's your favorite passage. But in the book of 1 Chronicles, yes, I said that. In the book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 12, the writer is chronicling the value of each tribe in Israel. Meaning God's people, here's the value that this tribe gives, this tribe gives, this tribe. When he gets to the tribe of Issachar, he says something very interesting. Look at it with me. 1 Chronicles 12:32. He says, and the sons of Issachar were men who, what are those next 3 words? Say them out loud together. Understood the times. Isn't that interesting? In other words, when we look around us, we don't know what the heck's going on. These people seem to understand the times that we're in. And don't you love the fact that he didn't stop there? Look what he says next. With the knowledge of what the people of Israel should do. That was my prayer flying up here from Atlanta yesterday. God, help us understand the times and give us insight and to know how to lead this emerging generation that sometimes doesn't need us at all and sometimes desperately needs us. Now, very quickly, let me give you the upside of Gen Z. I've given you some of the harsh realities, but let me give you 4 items, if you're taking notes or making mental notes, that I think we need to take heart in, okay? Number 1, Their focus as a generation is social justice for the marginalized. By and large, the 59 million members of Gen Z really cares about the marginalized. That's why Black Lives Matter marches in 2020 were highly populated by Gen Zers and millennials. It's not the only people that cared, but that was clearly it. Now, can I remind you something? Wouldn't you say our Savior has a deep compassion for the marginalized? Absolutely. You watch Jesus in the Gospels, and I mean, he's caring for the outsider. Sounds very, very Christ-like to me. Number two, they show high levels of compassion nationwide. So if you look at the youngest populations, they're showing higher levels of compassion on the data sets compared to the previous 3 generations at their age. Probably because they've been exposed to problems around the world. You know, Gaza, Ukraine, the mass shooting up in Maine. I mean, they're exposed to this stuff at young ages. Folks, just think for a minute. What were you worried about when you were 14? I'll be honest with you. When I was 14, I think my biggest worries were, where's my baseball mitt and how do I find a girlfriend? Today, they're thinking about those things I just listed. It's very different. Start with empathy to get to grit. Start with empathy to get to grit. Number 3, the third item I'd say is they have a high interest in entrepreneurship. Did you know that 72% of public high school students in America want to be an entrepreneur? Did you hear the number? 7 out of 10. Which means they look at the landscape right now and they say, I'd rather start something than join something. And sometimes when they don't want to join something, they're looking at what we're doing. It seems really antiquated. They do it way different. What if we could start entrepreneurial zones at our workplaces where we're already established, funding is coming in, we're selling goods and services, but we're having startup areas for entrepreneurial spirits that are on the team that are creatives, and we get to start something within the larger company. Wouldn't that be cool? One more. A Universum survey of Gen Z worldwide shows that Gen Z has a keener interest in leadership globally than the previous 3 generations at their age. This should make us happy. In fact, Gen Z, by and large, there's some exceptions, but by and large would say leadership is not about a power trip or a position. It's about solving problems and serving people. Solving problems and serving people. Can I say it again? Solving problems, serving people. That sounds like the kind of leader I want to have, doesn't it you? So if we could cultivate them and disciple them, equip them to be ready and wise when it's time for them to take their place and solve problems and serve people, maybe the future is bright, not dark, because we got them ready. All right, so I need to land the plane. One more passage, then I'm going to give you some very practical, like I said, a prescription, if you will. You know, the Psalms in the Old Testament are filled with places where David or other psalmists are beckoning us to care about the next generation. I don't know if you noticed that. It's all through the Psalms. Let me just give you one passage. In Psalm 78:6, we read these words. So the next generation would know, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. Do you see what's God's trying to establish there in that psalm? We should be thinking the future all the time. Act now for later. Act now for later. The very title of this series. So what can we do now, caring adults, assuming you're a caring adult? What can we do now that's all about preparation? What if we prepared not the path for the child, but we prepared the child for the path? If we changed our focus and they were ready when it was their turn. Okay, enough said. So how do we lead them? Let me take the last 10 minutes or so, and I want to just give you some simple shifts that I made as I work with and lead and teach students, the next gen. Some of these will be very relevant. You may want to scribble them down. Some of them, maybe not so much. Eat the fish, spit out the bones. Here they are. Number of shifts that I think we ought to make. The first one is really basic, but if you're like me and how I was, you might need this one. Don't think control, think connect. Let me confess a sin. When things went awry in my house with our 2 kids, or as I taught classes, whenever things seemed out of control and a little bit awry, I would want to jump in and seize control. I think that's human nature. We just, all right, get out of the way. Here's what we're going to do. Can I remind you, control is a bit of a myth. You might curb behavior, but I've never been able to control the attitude of a teenager. If you have, I'd love your autograph. I've never met a person that can control. But listen to me. So I need to stop seeking control. What if I seek connection at the heart level, where maybe it is that proverbial arm around the shoulder where I'm just saying, tell me what's going on. I mean, that didn't sound like you. What's happening? Was there a reason for that statement or that behavior? But if I seek connection at the heart level, I don't control them, but I certainly am going to get closer and now have deeper influence in their lives. So you might need to control more when they're 5 years old or 6 years old, but I would say shift over to seek connection as they get middle school, high school, and college. Number 2, don't think inform, think interpret. Remember I just mentioned they don't need us for information, they need us for interpretation. So listen, don't be the lecturer, don't be the talking head. Let me tell you what I learned back in 1968. I don't think that's gonna go over well, okay? I turned into a history teacher around the dinner table. They need us for interpretation. My focus was helping them make sense of what they learned and shaping their worldview. I wanted to help them develop a worldview where, when they went off to college, they didn't need another GPS in life. They had a compass in life. Do you see the difference? You know what a GPS is, don't you? Turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right. You have arrived at your destination. We can use those when we know exactly where we're going and we have an address to plug in. Once they graduate and they're off to college, are you going to go with them? I don't think so. So what I really worked on when my kids were in high school is giving them a sense of a heart compass, a moral compass on the inside, where they had their own set of values that they had constructed, not me, they. And when they went off to college, they knew their true north. They knew how to make a decision. They didn't always do it perfectly, but boy, they went with a compass. Number 3, don't think rules, think equations. You know, down through history, adults have been brilliant at coming up with more and more and more rules for our children, okay? So I'm just saying, I don't know if I know too many kids that love rules. I don't know a kid that said, would you just give me another rule today? Would you give me another rule? So here's the genius of equations. Gets to the same goal, but in a much better way, inside out. Equations, you know what equations are, don't you? An equation is, if you do this, that's the benefit. If you do that, this is the consequence. Isn't that how life works? Try not paying your rent or your mortgage this month. Try it. It's an equation. The bank's not going to yell at you, but they're going to send you a piece of paper with more numbers on it that you owe the bank. It's an equation. So I felt like the sooner I teach my kids how life works on their level, so if they did something, they'd already knew the equation up front whenever we have these exchanges, and I'd say, oh, you made a bad equation, give me your phone, or you'll have to come in at 9 or whatever, because they knew equations before they graduated, and that's how life's working as they both pay rent right now as adults. Don't think lecture, think lab. You probably have noticed I like to talk. Yes, I do. But I stopped doing the lecture thing by the time they were probably 12 or 13, and I decided to create more labs. Do you remember science class in college? If you went to college, remember science class? There was a lecture and a what? A lab, right? So the lecture was the boring part. That's where the professor stands in front and says, blah, 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 from the textbook. The lab was the fun part. You got to go in that lab with Bunsen burners and test tubes and blow things up. It was way more experiential. What if you created experiences for your kids and then you dialogue from those experiences? So it's not a talking head. It's an experience you have together. I think if I had to parent all over again, I'd do fewer explanations and way more experiences that were guided in our dialogue afterwards. When our kids were growing up, we'd go see a movie together. We'd go to Starbucks afterwards. Let's talk about the plot. Let's talk about the worldview of the main character. What do you think God would think about that? What do you think about the reasoning of that? We would just unpack the whole story, but it helped them learn how to think, not just what to think, which leads me to what's coming up here. Don't think tell, think ask. So when your children are very young, you do need to tell them, don't touch the hot stove. Don't stop doing that, okay? But as your kids get older, I think we ought to lead not so much with imperatives, with statements, but with questions. I started asking lots of questions by middle school, high school. What was your thought on that? Or how did you come to that conclusion or whatever? That made them practice metacognition. They were thinking about their thinking. You know who I learned this from? Who, Tim? Okay, I'm going to tell you. Jesus. If you read the Gospels, did you notice how many times Jesus answers questions with, I need you to say it out loud. More questions, yeah. Think about the Gospel of Luke. I want to just give you one example where Jesus led with a question. Do you remember the time the religious leaders came to Jesus? It was a great showdown. They asked the question, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And they thought they trapped him. Because if he says yes, he just submitted to the lordship of Caesar. And if he said no, we can arrest him and put him in jail. Nailed him. But do you remember how Jesus responded to the question? Here's what he said. He probably shrugged his shoulder. Whose image is on the coin? Remember this? And they answered Caesar. And then he said this, then render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but render unto God what is God's. That was a profound statement. Because the next verse says, and no one dared ask him any other questions that day. Do you know why they said that? Do you know why no one dared ask him any other questions? Here's what he was teaching with this question. Whatever object has an image pressed on it, then you give that homage to that coin or that object to the person whose image is on it. Caesar's image is on the coin. Give it to Caesar's. You've been made in the image of God. You should be giving yourself to God instead of asking me stupid questions about taxes. No wonder the next verse says, and no one dared ask him any other questions that day. He was teaching them. I'm saying we've got to get better at leading with questions, especially as they turn 13, 14, all the way through middle school, high school. Here's a couple of others. Don't think prescriptive, think descriptive. So most of kids' life in the 21st century, I'm going to talk about this later today in the parent deal. We're very prescriptive in our leadership, meaning we prescribe every step of the way for kids to take because we know better. We want them to score high on the SAT. We want them to graduate and get the scholarship, blah, 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 blah. So we're prescriptive. Problem is we're teaching them what to think, but not how to think. So when I say descriptive leadership, what I mean is, what if you sat down together with your son or daughter when they're old enough to have this conversation and say, let's describe together a goal you want to reach. And then let's back into it by you coming up with, what do you think the steps are you should take? They'll say, I don't know. Well, think about it. And you're a guide, but not a God, as you help them come up with the steps. This is a new exercise because most kids in America, God love them, and God love us, have been led very prescriptively, which is why so many are unready for the career when it's time. Not everybody, but too many. Two more. Don't think what, think why. I kind of alluded to that earlier. Don't just tell them what to do, tell them why. Once a high school or college student knows the why behind something, it's so much easier to get collaboration and cooperation because you shared the why, not just the what. So instead of just barking out order, do this, do this, do this, and they're wondering, why would I do this, old man? You're saying, here's the why behind we do it. And maybe they'll come up with a better answer with that why. Okay, last one. Don't think manage, think mentor. This is huge. Teachers in the room. Don't we have a term in education? Classroom management. Don't forget classroom management. And you know what this means, laymen that aren't teachers. We're trying to manage the chaos with those 27 children, right? That's what it means. Folks, can I remind you something you already know? I don't know one kid that says, would you just manage me? Manage me, would you? You're chuckling because you know that's stupid. I do know lots of kids that would say, I'm looking for a mentor. I look for someone that wants to build a relationship first, not inform me first. And through that relationship, they're actually giving me some great coaching that I welcome through a relationship, not a position. So I want to illustrate real quick as I close. When both of my kids were 13, my wife and I created a rite of passage experience for them. I don't have time to get into that now. I'll probably do it later today. But when I say rite of passage, kind of like a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah for girls and boys, it was a rite of passage experience where they were given mentors and experiences and trips. It was amazing. But what I did to get them ready at age 12 was I let each of them, I have a son and a daughter, pick a trip they wanted to go on, anywhere. And I would take them there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and we would have a time to both have fun with what they chose, but also to have some meaningful dialogue. Well, when it was my son's turn, my son is second born. He's 31 now. When he was 12, I said, Jonathan, pick anywhere in the world you want to go, and we're going to go. It dawned on me when I said anywhere in the world that probably was a little bit too broad. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he could pick Tokyo, or Moscow or something. Thankfully, you're going to love this. He picked Minneapolis, Minnesota. Really random to me. I said, why Minneapolis? He goes, well, the Mall of America's up there, Camp Snoopy. Remember, there's a roller coaster in the mall, up in Mall of America. And then he's a thespian. There's a show up there that he knew the director, and he wanted to see the show and meet the director. So we went up to Minneapolis. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of the trip were really fun. Oh my gosh. We rode roller coasters, ate junk food, went to shows, had pillow fights, and did stuff we never told his mother about. But on Monday, he knew that would be some meaningful conversation. And so he kept worrying about it. Dad, what are you going to talk to me about? What are you going to teach me on Monday? Dad, what's the talk? I said, Jonathan, just relax. it's going to be fine. So on Monday, I said, now we're not going to have any pillow fights or roller coasters today. We're going to go up and we're going to have a conversation. So we drove a rental car up to one of the 10,000 lakes that's up there in that area. And I found a small parking lot right next to a lake. And I pulled into the parking lot, into the parking spot. And I said, Jonathan, I want to do something different now. He got scared. What? I said, Jonathan, I want to trade places with you. What does that mean? I said, well, I'm going to get out of this car, out from behind the driver's seat. I'm going to climb into the passenger seat. I want you to hop in the driver's seat, and I want you to drive this car. You would have thought I told him to rob a bank. Dad, that is illegal. That is illegal. That is illegal. It's illegal. He's a rule keeper. I said, Jonathan, we're not going to drive out in the main road. We're just going to stay here in the parking lot. But I want to see if you, at 12, can handle this big, 2-ton machine. This is the next thing he said. Dad, Mom will not like this. She will not like this at all. I said, Jonathan, we don't have to tell Mom, do we? That's what I said. We did tell Mom. But it took me 15 minutes to talk this 12-year-old boy into getting behind the wheel and driving it, but I did. Now, I believe kids learn just in time, not just in case. So boy, was he ready to learn how to drive a car in 5 minutes. I explained the steering wheel and the ignition and the accelerator and the brake and the gear shift and everything else. And when I finally kind of gave him the preparation, he was ready and he turned on the engine. Well, guys in the room, remember what you felt when you first turned on an engine? This is cool, man. This is cool, So he turns it on and then he shifts it into reverse and he starts backing up. Well, within 5 minutes, he's doing everything he's seen me do. He's doing this and, diagonal parking, parallel parking, racing through the parking lot, stopping it right before the end of the parking lot. He drives for 15 minutes and he did great. It was scary, but he did great. So we finally pull into the parking spot again. We switched places. I got behind the wheel and I said, Jonathan, this is going to really sound cheesy. This is going to feel cheesy, but I want you to be honest with me. How did you feel when you first got behind the wheel? He was honest. He said, Dad, I panicked. I didn't think I could do that. I said, what did you just show me? I guess I showed you I could do it. I said, Jonathan, that's exactly how you're going to feel becoming a man. You're going to feel like you don't know what you're doing. I didn't either, because everything's changing and now you've got responsibility. But I said, Jonathan, listen to me. As you become a man, you got to be a driver, not a passenger. Passenger can wave friends out the window, get distracted, and blame somebody else when you didn't get to where you wanted to go. You need to be a driver where you own this. And you showed me with a car you could do it. I think with your life, you can do it. And from that point on, we talked about how his body would be changing over the next several years, how his view of girls was going to be changing, how his view of his parents was going to be changing. But we began to talk then at that point about how life would look as a man, not overnight, but over time. It was such an experience that we still talk about it to this day. He's making decisions at 31. He goes, I got to be a driver. I don't know what I'm doing, but I got to be a driver. After that experience, same trip though, I noticed there was a graveyard just about 5 minutes away from that parking spot. So I drove over to the graveyard, but we parked the car and I said, Jonathan, this is gonna feel really weird, but I want us to walk around this graveyard. It's daytime, so it's not weird, but I want us to walk around this graveyard and I want us just to read what is on the gravestones. Read them? Yeah, I don't know these. I know. Let's just read it. What's being put there? I want to talk about it with you afterwards. Well, it was weird and a little morbid, but for 15 minutes in utter silence, we read tombstones. When we were done, we both sat down on the curb. It was just a boy time. And I said, what'd you see? I want to tell you what I saw. Well, he said the obvious. He said, well, I saw that some people lived a really long time. Other people, a really short time. Some people had really nice things said about them. Other people, not so much. And then I said, you know, when it's all over, we're going to get a sentence. And it's not the sentence we say about our life, our purpose statement. It's what do they say by the way they watched us live our lives. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Folks, I got to be honest with you. I've talked to tens of thousands of students over the last 44 years. I had the greatest conversation with a 12-year-old kid, my son, that day as he talked about, this is what I once said when it's over. I share that only because experiences beat explanations. They do, they just do. But we've had something to go back to as he grows and as I grow. And it's all about me making shifts in the way I lead. So I want to show you one last bit here. I have noticed throughout history, when we as a people in America go through hard times, usually it's hard, but it leads to good news. Hard times develop strong generations. Would you agree with that? By and large. My mom and dad's generation that grew up in the Great Depression, World War II, they're pretty resilient, pretty resourceful. Now watch this. Strong generations usually develop good times, which we later enjoyed post-World War II. Unfortunately, good times often cultivate weak generations, which in turn lead to hard times. Here's what I'm thinking. Wouldn't it be cool if the tough times we happen to be in right now actually made our kids stronger as adults? Wouldn't that be cool? What if instead of just letting them be victims, and they are victims of a very weird time, COVID-19, what if we said, this is a fitness center. You're going to be stronger spiritually, socially, emotionally, intellectually because of these times. When I compare the first two generations of the 20th century to the first two generations of this century, there's crazy parallels. Notice this. The first two generations of the 20th century, they faced the Spanish flu pandemic. The first two of this generation, COVID-19 pandemic. Back in the 20th century, they grew up during the Roaring 20s. You've heard about that. Wouldn't you agree we have our own version of the Roaring 20s right now that I can only imagine being a child in? Then they face a horrible economic depression. And ours isn't a depression, but it's very volatile economic times. But here's what I thought. What if Gen Z and the Alphas became the next greatest generation that Tom Brokaw wrote about way back in the day? What if they're stronger for the times we're in? So here's my conclusion. If we lead them well, they'll be problem solvers. If we don't lead them well, they'll be a part of the problem. If we lead them well, they'll embrace a service mindset. If we don't, they'll embrace a scarcity mindset. Things are running out. If we lead them well, they'll enjoy post-traumatic growth. If we don't lead them well, they'll be triggered by stress. If we lead them well, they'll emerge with a grit narrative. And if we fail, they'll emerge with a victim narrative. I need help, I'm a victim at 45. If we lead them well, they'll see a silver lining. And if we don't, they'll just see the dark cloud. And if we lead them well, they'll be resilient and resourceful. And if we don't, they'll be reactive and regretful. So folks, I want to pray with you. And I want to pray toward that end. This series is now for later. I would love to beckon all of you, not just today, but this series. Let's live now for what's coming in the future. Amen. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, just help us to do what I've just said. Help us to hold on to the things you want us to hold on to and scrap the rest. But Holy Spirit, please move in our lives and give us not only the insight we need, but the power we need to do this. Help us to be discerning and read our kids before we lead our kids. And I'm asking, out of this church family and all the sites that are here, I pray you would help us become the greatest bunch of adult leaders that they could ever have. I ask this all in the name of Jesus. And God's people said, amen. God bless you all.
Well, hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope this service impacted you. Want to ask you, can we pray for you? One of the great things we get to offer here online is the ability to go to newpointe.org/prayer. You can actually submit a prayer request right there, and it'll go to one of our team, and we can be praying for you this week specifically. Well, hey, if you haven't had a chance to visit any one of our in-person services, I want to encourage you this next week to come and stop by. We would love to meet you, give you a tour, and talk to you and tell you what we're all about in our local communities. Thanks again for joining us. It's been a fantastic service. Have a great week.